The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists. Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Hello all.
Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page.
Howdy doody.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Happy 2023.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one. The boldest Bitcoin calls for 2023 are out, and a 1,400% rally or a 70% plunge may be on the cards. Yes, they say that Bitcoin could go up or down in 2023. Ben Ark, what do you think of their predictions? Will Bitcoin go up or down in 2023?
I think they're both possible. They could go one way or the other, as always, up or down. So, but I mean, I like Tim Draper and his constant enthusiasm because he's got so many coins, obviously, of the 250K target, which I still think is to play, but how far we go down before we get to that 250 grand, I'm not sure. And it will definitely be a rally up to the halvening. It's funny because when we started going down in this bear market, the halvening felt so far away, and now it is but a year and a bit away. So, yeah, I think probably a bit of sideline action, but there's some interesting capitulation by miners at the moment, selling their bitcoins, which is usually a good sign that we've truly bottomed out. And there is blood in the streets. There's no denying that. So, yeah, I'm not sure how much further down we can go, but it's possible. It's possible that we might end 2023 at 5K, but shortly afterwards, with the rally for the halvening, I'm sure we will start to Tim Draper. But that could also happen mid-year or at the beginning of this year. Who knows? The economic climate out there is very unpredictable in all realms, and Bitcoin's not excluded from that. So,
if you can't trust a guy with hundreds or perhaps thousands of Bitcoin, who can you trust? Victoria Jones, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin in 2023?
Yeah, there are some interesting predictions on there. I think it's highly unlikely, unfortunately, that we're going to get to 250,000 this year unless something major happens. At the moment with the Federal Reserve, increasing interest rates until they're given a very good reason to capitulate, that's not going to change anytime soon. And of course, their policies are sucking liquidity out of the market, which affects everything, not just Bitcoin. It's affecting the stock market, it's affecting housing. So the only thing that's doing well at the moment is energy, which is also placing a squeeze on the miners. So it's hardly surprising they're having to sell at the moment. So, if you want to put your tinfoil hat on, if you wanted to do everything you could to bring down the price of Bitcoin, this would be the way to do it. So if you believe the world is benevolent and everyone wants Bitcoin to take off, forget it. We've got some powerful enemies and a long way to go. So I think we could go a lot further lower, and then I think we'll definitely rally into the halving, but I think how high we go will depend on how low we've been before that. So that's my analysis of the situation.
The Fed will reverse course, the war in Ukraine will end peacefully, and monkeys will fly out of my butt. Dan Eve, the price of Bitcoin in 2023.
Well, I definitely think that Tim Draper's his 250K is a bit optimistic, right? Because it's before the halvening, and you don't really we've never had historically an all-time high like just before a halvening. And actually yesterday was almost 15 months to the day before the next halvening, which is historically, apparently, I can't remember who said this, but 15 months before the halvenings, when the kind of the bottom generally is. But I don't know, I've got a feeling it could creep a bit lower in January. I think it just seems like we haven't there's been blood in the streets, there's been chaos, there's been disorder, there's been arrests, there's been all the drama that you'd expect, but there still hasn't been I don't think we're at desperation levels yet, as sad as it sounds. Like there's been all this bad stuff happening, but it's really, I haven't heard anyone say, oh man, this is getting crazy. You know, it's almost like we haven't kind of reached that stage yet. But I like the way the article said the next halvening is slated to happen sometime in 2024. But it doesn't take much to Google it and find out, you know, a predicted date at least, which is currently the 30th of March. And also the way they use the term phenomenon to describe the halvening, which is it says, you know, just because out of curiosity to see the precision of this, it says the dictionary says terms most commonly used to refer to occurrences that defy explanation or baffle the observer. So, but it's got a very good reasoning to it. So it's not really something that's baffling or defies much explanation. It's a very logical reason that you're halvening the supply instead of increasing the supply, because that's, you know, part of the reason why we've got a fixed schedule. But it's strange for someone like Draper, who knows so much about Bitcoin and has been in for so long, to kind of call 250k an all-time high outside of the normal cycle, because kind of most people you know, refer to the halvening cycle, the pump that happens after it. Standard Chartered, just for reference, who said the 5k, the most sad prediction, they said it's a 70% plunge from here. But just for reference, Standard Chartered is 63% from their all-time high in 2010 as their share price, and actually 80% down from the 20-year lows. 80%. So they're not doing too good, really. Maybe the last 4 years they've done okay in picking their share price up from like $336 to $686, but they're not doing so good themselves. So they should be more optimistic about Bitcoin and buy in, because it might might increase their share price eventually. But it's sad to see that McAfee's prediction's not on here, because, you know, he would have been extending his 500k in his own dick prediction if he was here. So that it's sad that we don't have his, you know, his insane call to talk about as well. So you know, I tip my hat to you, sir. But on a positive note, with all the destruction of FTX and everything, I was thinking about this earlier. So the more business, see, I don't like these businesses to fail. I'd rather they just weren't scammers, right? And they didn't snitch people up. But the more that fail, the less of them there are to hold on to your Bitcoin instead of you, and therefore reducing third-party risk. So that's a positive to come out of all these collapses.
That's what they all said. They said, if only John McAfee was alive to eat his own dick. And they've also said we'd go to 3,000. We haven't seen that. They'd said we'd go to 1,300. They said we have to retrace all the way back before we see a rise, but we didn't see a rise. We didn't trace all the way back. We've got one more question, the exit question, predicting against the greatest predictor in all of Bitcoin history. Ben Ark, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Yeah, let's go higher. Why not?
Victoria Jones, do you share Ben's optimism?
Well, I said a little bit high last week, and I was right, very little bit. I don't know whether or not that will continue, though. There's lots of rumors on the street of more crises on the horizon, so I think we could be lower next week.
No, not more crises. Ben, Dan Eve, higher or lower?
Well, fortunately, I copied Victoria's prediction last week and went higher as well, so I'm also slightly correct. But now, I think just a bit lower. But that's not copying. So.
And now we'll ask the ball. Remember, shaking it could cause bubbles. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Says it is certain. It is certain. So the ball has spoken. Very confident. Magic Bitcoin ball. Moving on to issue 2. Key Bitcoin developer calls on the FBI to recover $3.6 million in stolen Bitcoin. Luke Dash Jr., a popular Bitcoin developer, allegedly got hacked this week, saying that his PGP key was violated. His cold storage, which is supposed to be offline, seems like it was online. And of course, the thieves took not just one, not just some, but all of his Bitcoin, which he seemed like he had all in one stack. I think it was like 200 Bitcoin or something like that, allegedly stolen from Luke Dash Jr. Of course, this narrative fits really well into Binance and others' attacks on Bitcoin, saying that average Bitcoin users are too stupid to hold their own cold storage. Victoria Jones, what do you think about this Bitcoin developer and this libertarian calling on the FBI to get back his money?
Well, there's a lot of irony in this story, isn't there? I mean, I have to say, everywhere that I've seen anything written about it, everyone's kind of going, what the hell is he doing in order to try and store his private keys? I mean, it's so convoluted. I mean, if the average person read that and go, that's what I have to do to store my private keys. I mean, it's just so overwhelming. It's like, why Trez, of heaven's sake. So you know, it's everyone's very puzzled as to exactly how he was storing his Bitcoin, and I think that has a lot to answer for before everyone gets really whipped up about it. And then, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, the concept of calling on the FBI to help you. I mean, even in the past, often it's been other members of the community who've kind of looked at the blockchain and tried to chase down who the hackers might be. That's normally been where the best solutions have come from. So, yeah, for a libertarian to be running to the FBI, I mean, there's huge irony. And they say that right at the end of the article, don't they? It's just like, you know, what is it? The decentralized platforms cutting out centralized authorities is a pipe dream. And it's just like, well, yeah, it seems like that. But the reality is, you know, with a new monetary system, a lot of these authorities need to be recreated. So, so there are lots of anomalies in that story. And I think there's still a lot to be unraveled before we all get whipped up about it.
Well, if we look at the story just basically, he's violating all of the basic cold storage, personal storage usage rules that we try to tell you about here. Number one, he has all of his Bitcoins in one stack. This is really easy for math calculations. How much is my stack worth? You know, you just multiply the stack number by the Bitcoin price. But it's very bad for hacking situations because the hackers always take it all. They always take it all. So if he'd even had 2 PGP keys, maybe the second one wouldn't have been compromised. It does seem like he has a very complicated way of holding his Bitcoins. I heard about another guy who held his Bitcoins in LastPass. Yes, he put the key in there, and then he put the lock in there too. So when the hackers decrypted his LastPass, they got the lock, they got the key. Don't store the lock with the key. It sounds like Luke Dash Jr. had all of his Bitcoins online, not in cold storage, didn't have multiple Trezors or ledgers, multiple stacks, and it seems like he lost them all. Dan Eve, what do you think about Luke Dash Jr. and his appeals to the FBI? Although he does seem sarcastic. He's like, oh, I knew you wouldn't help me anyway, FBI. But he's also just complaining about the service. He wants his pizza in 30 minutes or less, or it's free.
Yeah, God damn it, you FBI. I paid my taxes, you goddamn scammers. I thought that was quite amusing. I mean, no, obviously it's really sad, right? You know, he's a core developer. He's been doing so since 2011. He's contributed a lot to the community, including obviously not just code, but also crazy tweets. But he's a very interesting character, and you'd think that someone who's kind of so embedded in Bitcoin would follow the kind of the storage principles, right? The article did point out that that he said, you know, what one was from a hot wallet and one was from a cold wallet, but the cold wallet was connected to the internet, so it's not cold storage, right? That's by the very definition of cold storage, it's kind of not cold storage. But it does sound, you know, as Victoria said, it sounds very kind of complicated the way he's done it, and maybe he thought, you know, if I'm storing it like this, that, and the other, it's going to confuse people and they won't ever try to hack me. Or maybe it's that kind of principle that it's like not the bicycle helmet fallacy, but like the if he's such a shrewd coder and knows everything so well that no one will even bother trying to hack him, so he can kind of be lax in his security processes because people will think, oh, I'm not going to try and hack him because he'll, you know, he's probably so secure that it's just going to waste my time. Sounds like it was maybe linked to this server issue that he had in, I think, November, they said. So that could potentially be it, or some software, BTC or something, knots. What was it called? Something knots. Some sort of software that had a backdoor in that he's recommending that people.
Well, Dan, with the server issue in November, it sounds like he had some warning of this And at the very least, he could have taken his Bitcoin, moved them to another account. It wouldn't have cost him that much. He could have gotten a Trezor or a Ledger. He could have split up the pile. It seems like you have to, if you have a warning, you get one of those little messages, someone's trying to log into your Google, at the very least, change your password, right? I mean, that's a normal person thing to do. This is a, grand level programmer. He had this warning. Seems he did nothing. He left the money where it was.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? And the thing is, though, when I've had a kind of scare like that before, I thought, what if my device is compromised? And then you go through right, I'm going to generate new keys, and I even bought a new laptop just to create the new seed from the brand new laptop that was not connected to the internet and all that. And then I was like, then it took about a year to actually send the crypto from one place to the other, because I kept on fretting about it and thinking, well, what if I've compromised it by doing the very action of, and you kind of maybe get yourself into a bit of an anxious loop over how to secure your own funds. And I think what's sad about this is that like CZ Binance saying it was saying a while back that self-custody will never catch on, and kind of this is unfortunately not proves it right, but fights a case for that, right? That you've got someone who's so well known in the Bitcoin industry who then gets hacked because of compromised keys. But he even tweeted about it, CZ Binance, and said, sad to see even an OG Bitcoin core developer lost 200 Bitcoin. Self-custody has a different set of risks. So a bit of it's a fair point, right? It's got a different set of risks, but there's definitely needs to be more emphasis on how to, store your crypto securely. Obviously the most secure you can be is split the words, the 12-word seed into 12 different security deposit boxes, but in 24 different banks. You've got 2 versions of or something crazy like that. I don't know. You can go down to all sorts of levels of security. But as you're saying about LastPass, I don't know if you remember when in 2017, when Ian Billionaire, another very sad case, where live doing an ICO shilling session, someone had hacked into his Evernote and just basically wiped his funds from before his very eyes. So all of it's very
and that was the same thing where he stored the key and the lock in his Evernote. And so if you got control of the Evernote, you got the key, you got the lock, you're ready to go.
Yeah, and it's sad, it's not nice to see anyone losing funds, but it is one of the the risks of Bitcoin. Unfortunately, so we just need to kind of support each other more, and in terms of information on how to secure your Bitcoin, use cold storage, all that sort of thing, and make sure that your seed isn't compromised as best you can.
I'm just, of course, reminded of Philip K. Dick, the famous sci-fi author, who worried in the 70s about if someone had blown up his safe, and his safe was full of writings and alternate drafts and things. And he eventually got down to it, and he realized that it was quite possible that he had blown up his own safe. And that was a far greater problem to him than the government. And in many ways, Luke Dash Jr., with his overcomplicated solution here, blew up his own safe.
Well, one other thing that's interesting about the whole thing is how many people kicked off knowing that when they found out he had 200 Bitcoin, but was asking for donations. And just because you have money, it doesn't mean you can't be supported for your efforts in writing code for Bitcoin, right? It's it's quite a big, not an orchestrated attack, but a lot of attacks from different people going, hey, you've got loads of Bitcoin, you shouldn't have more money. Like, come on, guys, if you're doing something that's worth value, then why not be rewarded for it?
Well, but he's got to listen to that Mad Bitcoin's advice where you hodl plus take profits. If he didn't take any profits, he could be hodling up and hodling all the way back down. And it's very, very stressful. It feels horrible right now. Ben Ark, what do you think? Did Luke Dash Jr. blow up his own safe? Do you think he got paid by CZ from Binance to serve as a good example that no one can handle their own keys?
I think the disappointment which people felt towards donating towards Luke Dashir is, and it's Dashir as well, not Dash Jr., is many times over the years he's almost not said exactly, but implied poverty. So Luke Dashir was always the core developer who didn't have any Bitcoin. And then he would tweet about how he needs, dental care for his children. Then he can't continue to work on Bitcoin because he hasn't got any money. And then people donated towards Luke Deshire because they want him to continue all his great work, which he does. And then it turns out he's got a bigger stack than most of us who, so I can see why there is some animosity from the community of people who have contributed towards Luke Deshire, or maybe how honest he was on his financial situation. I think that is disappointing. And it just by the amount of people, you have to listen to the kickback when it comes from such a large amount of people, and not just sort of fob it off as, people just, kicking the dude while he's down. When it comes to, it's a hot wallet if he's got these funds online. And Luke Deshire's, he's like an old school, computer scientist. He runs his own servers and probably has his own servers in his house, his own server rack. About 5 years ago, I did a little bit of snooping around on one of his servers and got a whole bunch of family photos, which he probably didn't want the world to see. So they weren't the most secure servers, and there were things on there which he probably didn't want people to have access to. And I remember raising an eyebrow back then when I was able to find those, and it wasn't particularly hard either. But I mean, it's sad, it's sad that he's lost that money. Hopefully, and I hope, I'm crossing my fingers, that it's just a massive OBSEC play. And like a lot of the Bitcoin Core developers who, I won't mention them, but a lot of Bitcoin Core developers who, publicly stepped back from the project, but then, said to people, look, it's less of a safe project to be working on now. It has all this outside eyes on it. And then they've publicly stepped back, but continue to contribute through pseudonyms and anonymous as anonymous users, rather than having their personal identity attached to the Bitcoin Core project. So I'm kind of hoping it's part of that, and it's part of a larger play where he'll say, oh, I'm going to step back from the project, then he'll continue to contribute. Bitcoin Knots as well, this is an important note, is Bitcoin Knots is Luke Deshire's own implementation of Bitcoin, which he signs the versions of using his PGP key, which by the sounds of it was compromised. You don't need to worry about Bitcoin Core because it's like multi-sig things. I think it's like 3 or 5 in order to be able to like push updates and things. There's so many eyes on that code base that it'd be pretty hard to like put in a backdoor. But yeah, some people are running Bitcoin Knots because it's good code on their back ends, and then to hear that this software could have been compromised for perhaps months, and maybe that's the reason that he lost these coins, must be very disconcerting, particularly if you're running some sort of software stack on top of it. But yeah, it doesn't impact Bitcoin Core. But yeah, it's a shame, man. I feel sorry for him, but at the same time, I do share some of that disappointment which other people in the community have, when over the years he's kind of but he's implied poverty, and then people have felt bad for the dude because he's such an important guy, and why isn't this guy being supported by the Bitcoin community? And they've donated Bitcoin to help him to continue to develop. I mean, if he was a little bit more forthright and just asked for an income to work on Bitcoin Core, I'm sure people still would have donated, but it's just the nature of those tweets and public messages which he put out there asking for donations. I think, wasn't particularly, it was a bit of a whack move on the shares. But yeah, he does good work. I hope he continues to work on the project. He isn't too disappointed by it all. And people saying, this is, how can normal people be expected to use Bitcoin and hold it in a self-custodial way? It's nonsense. Like, his security model clearly wasn't very good. If he'd had those funds on a hardware wallet, then they would still be secure now. And if they're actually in cold storage on a hardware wallet, then he would still have those funds now. So, using something like a Trezor or something. So, it's just clearly his security model wasn't. And again, he needs to be a little bit more public about how lame his security model was in order for people to get access to those funds in the first place.
It does seem still as though it's this disease of the forever holders, where he's got $3 million, maybe at the height of this thing, he's got $9 million. How much could his house have cost? Maybe he should have sold a third and paid off his house. I know it's hard for people. They're like, Bitcoin's going to $1 million. Every one that I sell is a disaster. But on the other side, you look at this guy, all the stress he's under, he's keeping them all in one stack. He's clearly, he's got the multiplication thing down. But other than that, his security is terrible. It's just a bad idea. I remember back in the day, I won't say his name, but a friend of mine would always talk about taking his paper wallets and making them smaller. And then at first they were 5 and 10 Bitcoin paper wallets, and then this was too much, and 2 or 3 Bitcoin wallets. And you just keep making them smaller and smaller because it expands the targets. If you lose 1 or 2 of your paper wallets, if you lose a Trezor, maybe your ledger's still okay. Maybe your crypto steel capsule thing you buried under the house is okay. You have to have these multiple things, even having multiple safe deposit boxes. As much as we're all like, oh, we hate the banks and all that, as Andreas has said many times, they're great at physical security. They're great at doors and locks and keys. And, your stuff's probably going to be fine in there. Plus, like Dan was saying, you could split up your code into multiple codes, put it in multiple safe deposit boxes. All of these are available to anyone. You don't have to be crazy technical to apply for a safe deposit box. But in this case, it would have helped. Let's see. Let's move on to the next issue. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where we've got the World Crypto Network audio podcast. Yes, it's ad-free, just like this show's ad-free. There's no donation links. Isn't that strange? Anyway, check out World Crypto Network podcast at worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, why Bitcoin supporters organized a bank run on crypto exchanges. Yes, Yahoo is finally talking about Proof of Keys Day, started by Trace Mayer in 2019. Proof of Keys Days ask Bitcoiners to take their money off of exchanges. As I'm sure the article could have said, if they had asked FTX to prove their keys, maybe more people would have their money today and less of it would have gone to FTX. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Proof of Keys Day?
Well, it's sad that we've just talked about the story of prominent Bitcoin figure losing his Bitcoin because he was hacked because of the way he stored his keys. But still, there's still so much more upside to having your own keys than to giving it to a company like FTX or Celsius. Like Bitcoin Magazine just did. Had an article about how the judge ruled that the Celsius users gave up their legal rights to their Bitcoin by using the platform, which means that $4.2 billion of deposits are now the property of Celsius. So that's insane. So you even entrust the company to not basically be dicks with your funds, and then even the laws on their side that they can keep your money. So that's just insane, right? And that can't actually happen if you're holding your own private keys. But obviously, you've got to do it securely. You've got to do it very securely. So it's in the backlight of Luke Dashier. I always thought it was Luke Dash Jr. So thanks for the correction, man. So Luke Dashier, in light of him losing his keys at the same time, it is best to keep to hold your keys. And what happened to Trace Mayer, right? Because his last tweet was, I think we said this last year, actually. Last tweet was February 24th, 2020. So after was it Grim? Which what was it Grim? Yeah, it just disappeared into the ether.
There was an incident at the Tone Vase Con where Trace Mayer was allegedly walking around promoting Mimblewimble or Grin coin with a weird piece of paper and a weird website, and people thought maybe he'd bought too much of the coin and he was trying to sell it, and it seemed kind of desperate. Everybody thought Trace was really well off. He was a lawyer. He had all these investments. He had this beautiful 7 network effects of Bitcoin. He did great podcasts. And then I suppose over the embarrassment of this one small issue and the natural overreaction of the Bitcoin community, he completely disappeared.
Oh yeah, because the first, I think it was either Trace Mayer's Run to Gold, which then turned into a Bitcoin podcast. It was either that or watching you on YouTube as Mad Bitcoins. That were definitely the two first shows. I can't remember which was the first. But what was cool was when you interviewed him at the Unconfiscatable conference, and he's the first thing he said was like, "I've been waiting to be interviewed by you for years." That was really cool. So that was just nice being in that involved in filming that.
And Trace was a great guy, and I think the community should forgive him for whatever it was about Grim and Mimblewimble coin. A lot of people fall for an altcoin. We don't have to throw them completely out. Obviously, though, I don't think he liked the reaction of the community.
Yeah. So he's probably gone into hiding, which is a shame because he did so much to promote Bitcoin. He was such a good force for Bitcoin. But yeah, back on the proof of keys. Yes, we've had like Celsius, BlockFi, Voyager, FTX, Alameda. Like these companies are just, and that's just from 2022 alone. You really should hold your own keys because that's hold your own Bitcoin and therefore hold your own keys and therefore your own Bitcoin, because you can succumb to these exchanges that go down just by rehypothecating your money. Because that's when I first heard rehypothecation as well, how Trace May was talking about that. So one place lends it to another, which lends it to another, which lends it to another. And that's how you see such a cascade of these companies falling down, as one can't repay the person before them. It's like the UK sort of housing chain where someone's waiting for someone else to sell theirs, to sell theirs, to sell theirs, to sell theirs. And if one falls through, then everyone falls through. It's this cascade event. So it's terrible. Hold your own private keys very safely, and please don't get robbed or lose your private keys.
It's interesting to see the article describe it as a bank run, which is what I've always thought it was. And I've always thought it was a little radical and unsafe. But like Dan said, after all of these shared custody failures, why wouldn't you want to try a bank run? Why wouldn't you want to make sure they have the money in their account? And while I agree with Josh Shigala from Vaultora, who always reminds us what a horrible day January 3rd is to do this. Most everyone's on vacation. The engineers aren't there. Often you're a completely legit exchange, but you've got to take money from the cold wallet, put it in the hot wallet, put it in the warm wallet, all these kind of things, which do take keys, which do take access to safe places and so forth, which sometimes you can't access on January 3rd. So I think it's poorly timed, but a great holiday, and even more important now than before, sadly. And you think things would get better. We'd have more adult exchanges. We have less adult exchanges. Ben Ark, what do you think about Prove Your Keys Day?
Yeah, Trace Mayer. I mean, I love Trace Mayer. It's such a shame that he had that kickback from the community, because Grimm's, the crypto bank Grimm's cool. It's cool. And Nimblewimble as well. So I can see why he's excited about it, particularly as he's a proper full-on libertarian. And I think why Trace is needed is he was always a great advocate for just ultimate privacy on the base layer on chain, for fungibility. This idea that verifying coins trumps fungibility is just, in my mind, wrong. Like the reality is you need as much, zero knowledge privacy on the base layer. So I was very much with Trace on that. So it was a real shame that that voice has gone, because I think he was always kind of pushing that dialogue, which was great. And similarly, another, just like Dan, he's a big influence for me when I first reached out and looked at content to consume for Bitcoin. There wasn't much out there. There was you, Thomas. Well, not Thomas. I mean, whoever this Mad Bitcoins guy is. And then there was Trace Mayer as well, and Max Kaiser as well, of course. So it was a shame that he felt so betrayed by the community. I mean, he'd worked so hard and tirelessly for Bitcoin. I think that he felt the cold hand of the Bitcoin community against him, and I think he felt betrayed, and that was a real shame. But yeah, no, the holding your own Bitcoin. I really liked what Nick Shinelli said on this. Was the core developer or ex-core developer, one of those people I mentioned before, in the kiss your keys. So keep it simple. Like the biggest risk, time and time again for people is seeing some tweets about multi-sig and blah blah blah, and then they create this very convoluted security profile for holding their Bitcoins. And in reality, they should just go out and get a hardware wallet, a couple of hardware wallets, like you say, split the funds up, have a wrench attack stash, have, your actual stash split up maybe against a couple of Trezors or a couple of hardware wallets if you can. And then split those seeds up. That's great. That's fine. That'll do, and have it simple enough that it's possible to restore, rather than doing something too convoluted. So kiss your keys, I thought was a great quote from him. But yeah, it's terrible timing for the industry and for all these exchanges. But maybe, that was Trace trolling these big exchanges, knowing that it would be a pain for them, because he wasn't such a fan of the big exchanges. But we'll see more and more ways of securing your Bitcoin coming out and developing over the next couple of years, because clearly this is it's always been not an issue, but it's always been one of the most important parts of Bitcoin is how do you actually secure the stuff? How do you actually keep it owned by you and then have it taken off you by hackers or whoever else? Obviously always be custodian of your own funds. It's like, I mean, with the FTX stuff, I mean, I hadn't even heard of FTX. I didn't know what FTX was until it all kicked off and FTX went under and everyone was all miserable and things. I was thinking, I don't even know what this thing is, this exchange. What's this? Who's this SBF guy? I don't know any of this stuff because, you know, I don't really engage with these exchanges. And I think that's how everyone should really be when it comes to Bitcoin. But keep it simple.
It is quite a shame that Trace isn't around anymore. I saw a video of Max Kaiser and Stacy at the Bitcoin 22 conference in Miami, and they were just over the moon. They were just so happy. Bitcoin was on the top. Max was burning $20 bills or what are his usual thing. And they were just so happy to get all the media attention and to be so strident about it too, because they are just so strong in their Bitcoin, having gone through so many of these ups and downs and presumably held on to their keys. It would be great to see Trace there with Max and Stacy and everyone else. Victoria Jones, what do you think about Prove Your Keys Day and the unfortunate disappearance of Trace Mayer?
Oh, yeah, I like Trace as well. It sounds like he's a bit of a hero, really. I saw a number of his interviews. I mean, again, I was, watching around the same time as I was watching you and a few others. So, so it's a shame. He was very lucid in the things that he said and very confident as well, which I think is what helped to encourage a lot of people. And I liked his intellect and his logical arguments. They were very powerful. I think it was him who stated that Bitcoin was like an ever-expanding blueberry that was just going to absorb the entire liquidity of the world. And I thought that was a great analogy. So it's a shame, but I don't blame him. And he doesn't, it's like a lot of people out there, they don't need to, but they do it because, they feel like they want to help others by understanding what they understand. And, he did a great job, I think. So yeah, I think that's a shame, but again, I think it was his initiative, wasn't it? The proof of keys thing, and I think it is a good initiative. I mean, a lot of people don't remember that the Federal Reserve was set up in 1913, and until that time, throughout the second half of the 19th century, you had a lot of individual banks, and from time to time they would fail, and this is where the whole concept of a bank run comes from. I mean, anyone who's under 100, and there aren't many of those left around anymore, won't have even witnessed anything like that. And of course, it's because of those bank runs that they ended up setting up the Federal Reserve in the first place. And so I think this is what people need to be mindful of when they get all freaked out about these cryptocurrency exchanges going down. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is part of the hidden agenda, because it was people freaking out about banks closing and the bank runs that would cause a knock-on effect that led to the installation of the Federal Reserve in the first place. And so, if people succumb to that kind of fear too much and aren't able to take responsibility of their own assets, then this is what you're calling for a centralized authority to do. And there are people who very well understand that that's the mechanism from history. So it's really important, I think, that we're mindful of that. It's important that we hold other people accountable for when they do things wrong, but be really, really careful about the solution that you end up with, because it may be way worse than the problem you've got right now. So I think that's worth highlighting.
I still think the FTX disaster is an interesting failure of the United States advertising industry. There were so many ads with so many great celebrities, as well as the sponsorship of Major League Baseball, specifically the umpires, the people who decide, they call balls and strikes, literally. And they had FTX, this corrupt company, on their shirts. All these ads with all these celebrities, never saying at the end, FTX is a Bahamian exchange. If I had known that during the ads, I would have mocked them the whole time. I foolishly assumed they were U.S. They did have a U.S. chapter. They were lobbying in the U.S. All the pictures of him were with senators and congresspeople from the U.S. But at the same time, this one little fact, we're in the Bahamas, you can trust us with your money, sounds ridiculous on its face. Obviously, none of us, I don't think, ever used the exchange other than the Blockfolio app being taken over. But even then, the Blockfolio app didn't pop up and say, "Welcome to the Bahamas, man. You can trust us with your money." It was just such a bad, not knowing that one fact changed the entire story. And obviously Sam wasn't from the Bahamas. His crew wasn't from the Bahamas. This wasn't a, forward facing Bahamanian exchange. These were US carpetbaggers that went down there, did whatever they want. And I think we're going to see more of that in other countries with weak laws. No exit question, but shout out to Trace Mayer. Hope he's watching. Hope he's doing well. Maybe a little umbrella drink in the hand, something non-alcoholic probably, but best of luck to Trace Mayer. Moving on to issue 4. Issue 4, Bitcoin will soar to $250,000 in 2023, says billionaire Tim Draper. Tim Draper is moving his prediction for 2022 over to 2023, but now he's talking about the Bitcoin halvening, which we're going to talk about pretty much every week from now on. The amount of Bitcoins being produced will fall from, 6.5 to 3.25, something like that. And it's going to keep getting smaller, and it happens automatically. It's not a phenomenon. But Victoria, what do you think about Tim Draper's incredible prediction and kind of the need for someone like this in Bitcoin, someone like Trace, someone maybe like Andreas, who's very respectful and trusted by the media, who can go out there and say, the price is still going up. Like, it's not over yet. The media loves to say when things are over, but someone like Draper or Andreas can say, it's not over yet.
Well, I have to say, I don't think I'd put Tim Draper in the same category as Trace Mayer and Andreas Antonopoulos at all. And in fact, if he keeps making predictions like this, he's not going to have much of a reputation left, because I think he's definitely over-egging the pudding. I mean, when you actually read the article as well,
or he might have to eat his own dick. There's always a possibility.
Well, at least he hasn't gone that far. I tend to think, maybe McAfee had to get himself arrested just to get himself out of that predicament. But if you actually read the article, one of his main reason is the fact that only 1 in 7 women hold Bitcoin wallets right now. It's like, dude, it's just like, what are you talking about? I mean, the thing is, we're going into the most predicted recession ever on the planet. I mean, almost every financial analyst that you listen to is predicting a recession, and women, a lot of women rely on the men in their lives for not all of them, obviously, but rely on the men in their lives for their income at all. If the men are suffering, the women are going to be suffering more. I mean, where is all of the money to start buying into Bitcoin going to come from? I mean, it's completely unrealistic. And if you still talk to people who know nothing about Bitcoin at all, the way they're suffering in their normal lives, I mean, they've got implicated, their heating bills are going up, their electricity bills are going up, the values of the houses are going down, food bills are going up. Most people are just trying to manage their lives. Where are they going to get the extra money to invest into Bitcoin, especially right now? I think he'll be right eventually, but right now, just the timing's completely off. I'm sorry.
I think he also thinks that the women are going to take the money, make money on it, and then go shopping. And it's a tough thing to say these days. It's partially true. Women do shop and they spend money.
Well, they do. So they'd rather spend it than buy Bitcoin. That's for sure.
Exactly. And everything's on sale now. Like physical goods are down. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Tim Draper and $250,000 a coin?
Well, I've read a few articles on this, and it does seem he kind of basically says, to shorten it, he says it's going to be $250,000 because women, because that. That's the shortened version, right? But I'm with Victoria about the 80% of retail spending, is apparently women, but they've got bills that are going up like everyone, like retail, and that's retail spending. It's not investments, right? So what percentage of male and female actually put money in investments, and especially high risk investments? Look at gambling, for example, and that is dominated. But gamblers are mostly men. I mean, obviously, there is some equality happening where more women are gambling as the days go by as well, but it's mostly men. Especially if you go, even now you go into the bookies, you don't see like a 50-50 in there. You see mainly old dudes just gambling their money away, and that's how a lot of people see Bitcoin right now, especially when again, as Victoria said, prices are rising. Like, fuel's going up, everything, housing's going up, everything's going up. It's just bread, all the basic supplies. So there's not that luxury of excess money to be throwing into a high risk asset. And then there's that kind of, I don't know if this is kind of, this is always treading on eggshells, like Humpty Dumpty, the horsemen of Humpty Dumpty, and just smashing them all instead because they got no dexterity, as Ricky Gervais pointed out. But aren't women apparently meant to be a bit slightly more risk averse? So in times where the costs are so insane for living, to be putting your money in this crazy Bitcoin internet money seems a bit out of kind of character almost from him. It's dare I say it, not desperation, but maybe he's thinking, oh, I just need to shill Bitcoin a bit more to pump it. But what I do agree is that in general principle, the number of women in Bitcoin is increasing steadily, and that's really positive for the ecosystem. It's not like this one-sided thing where you go to a conference and just see all dudes there. So that's ultimately good. But whether that's going to be the driver, and especially for 2023, it just doesn't seem too realistic. And but because it's prior to the halvening as well. So as the 1400%, it would mean as an upside from where we are now, which is huge. That's 14x from where we are now. I think he even said by mid 2023. So that's a very steep hike. And I don't know, it just seems like nowadays with Bitcoin becoming more ubiquitous, that these rises may be a bit slower than we've seen in previous cycles, because there's a lot more money. There's a lot more money in it to both short it, more avenues to short it than there were years ago as well, that have an impact on the overall price. So I don't know. 250k would be great if it did reach 250k. Like, everyone's going to be happy with that, but I don't think it's in 2023.
I think we've almost got a Monty Python sketch going here, where it's the middle of a economic crisis and you go to your wife and you're like, wife, what did you buy at the store? And she's like, I got magic beans. I got Bitcoin. And you're like, they're on a paper wallet. See, they're safe. They can't be. So what if they're on a paper wallet? I'll be happier with a can of beans or some food. So yes, it is very hard to think of women wanting to buy Bitcoin at this time, but I do like his dedication to.
And Craig Wright pretending to be the Messiah, is he's not Satoshi, he's a very naughty boy.
He's fake Satoshi. It's not real. But I like his 250k, and I like talking about the halvening, when the amount of Bitcoin being produced will reduce by half. I agree with Dan, it might go up slightly less, but at the same time, I wonder how many businessmen have heard about the halvening and are looking for that down point. They're looking for, when do I enter? I want to get in before the rest of the guys, but not too early because it could dip. And I think that calculation is going to go earlier and earlier. I think people are going to learn about the halvening earlier. They're going to invest earlier to be the one that beats the other guys, not to be the one that's entering too late, and that might spike the price before the halvening or after the halvening, or we just wait for supply and demand to take care of itself, as it always does. Ben Ark, what do you think of Draper's prediction of 250K, keeping in mind that he's the one that bought the Silk Road Bitcoin that the U.S. government should have spent on more Smithsonian museums?
I think he's correct. So there's plenty of money out there. It's just, and there's a lack of places to put that money currently. It's just the money isn't in the hands of everyday people. So everyday people are feeling the squeeze. But there's plenty of liquidity out there in asset markets. It's just literally nowhere to put it. So all these people with all this liquidity and they're aware of Bitcoin now. Bitcoin is this little puddle, mom and pop investors, average people investing money in Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin because they're interested in technology. They hear about Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. Their friend gets rich, so they buy some Bitcoin. And the institutional investors haven't been anywhere near Bitcoin. You have a few, billionaires who've got interested in Bitcoin over the years, but there's this huge ocean of liquidity, which as soon as the Bitcoin price goes up, and it does the usual predictable rise, which it's done in the past, where, we went from $300 to 20K, and then we went from down to 3K, and then we go up to whatever it is, $50,000, $60,000. And then we drop down to whatever we are now, 13K or 10K, where we'll end up eventually, in this bear market. And then boom, it will go back up to, I think if you just transpose those bull cycles onto the price as we currently are, it's 240K. is the where we're aiming, and like that's the and there isn't the money in Bitcoin. Institutional investors, people with all this liquidity and all this money, aren't putting it in Bitcoin. The squeeze which most people are feeling is wealth disparity. You have some people in the planet who have a hell of a lot of money, hell of a lot of resources and liquidity, and then you have fewer and fewer people on the other side who have, you know, a lot less money, and they're really feeling the squeeze, and that's very sad. But it's not normal people, normal, you know, Bitcoiners as plebs, the people who historically have bought Bitcoin and have got the price to where it is now with the help of a few billionaires along the way. It's all this institutional investment and that huge ocean of liquidity, which is just going to flood into this little puddle. And the reason the price is so volatile, the reason it can drop so much, is because there isn't enough liquidity in Bitcoin, which means that there can be a hell of a lot. We need more liquidity, and just as the price can be pushed down so heavily, it can go up, you know, just as quick. So yeah, I think 240k, 250k. I think Tim Draper's on it. He knows what he's talking about. He's correct.
We need more liquidity, Ben Ark. And just think about it. If the United States Smithsonian Museum accomplished their goal of creating a Smithsonian Museum in all 50 states, there'd be a free Smithsonian Museum in Iowa. And you could go there if you lived in Iowa and learn all about Iowa. There'd be one in Illinois. There'd be one in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, all over the place. There could be these amazing Smithsonian museums, but instead we sold the Silk Road Bitcoins for nothing to Tim Draper and other venture vulture capitalists. Running out of time, quick exit question. Predict the future. Will the price of Bitcoin rise to $250,000 in 2023 as Tim Draper has predicted? Dan Eve.
I don't think it will. It would be lovely, but I don't think it. I don't think it will. Maybe 2024 or 2025, but it would be great. I'd love to see it, but I just think it's just a bit too early. It's before the halvening, and it's not, you know, not in line with previous kind of cycles, I think.
I need a special button to push for more optimism. Victoria Jones, more optimism. 250k.
Well, I could say yes, but I would be lying. You know, I mean, I was listening to Twitter Spaces earlier today with Simon Dixon, and there were some very angry traditional investors on there talking about the Gemini exchange, really getting freaked out by the fact that there seems to be a hole in the DGB balance sheet. I don't think institutional investors are going anywhere near this in the immediate future. I think they will eventually, but this year, no, I don't think so.
Well, that's one of the best ones for me, because I got to go on a special DCG Napa wine tour, ate pizza with Barry Silbert, and now I'm more successful than them. I'm the one that didn't loan out any of my Bitcoin for any kind of earn programs or take anybody else's money allegedly and loan it out to other earning programs, which eventually went to FTX and lost all their money. The return on Bitcoin was fine. Why did these guys want so much more? Ben Ark, exit question, 250K. Show me some positivity.
Yeah, 100%. We could get there. Countries, big institutional investors, they'll start flooding into Bitcoin. As soon as it starts to trace up, and they're just aware of its historical boom bust cycles we've had in Bitcoin, everyone's going to join the bandwagon. All these people who have all this money, but they don't know where to put it, which is currently where we are, they'll all flood into Bitcoin, and that price just, we're so volatile, we have so little liquidity in Bitcoin, it can push the price up there. So hold on to those Bitcoins, try and sell as little as you can. I know it's hard because you've got, you know, obviously bills to pay and everything's going up in value. So this is just the nature of the game, isn't it? Like there's a brief window where normal people can latch on to something like Bitcoin, and they can make, you know, great returns and better the personal circumstances. But that brief window is closing, and on those people being able to buy Bitcoin and make those returns, and it's now going into the hands of those big institutional investors and governments as well. So yeah, it's huge. Like Bitcoin's potentiality to go up in value is infinite. And this year, 240K, 200K. I wouldn't be surprised if we hit 200K, totally.
Finally, some optimism. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of those large institutional investors wanted to invest their profits in the Smithsonian Museum, creating 50 Smithsonian museums in all 50 states. And as Ben said, it's simply a matter of basic economics. If the supply of Bitcoin is going down, which we know it is because we know about the halvening, we talk about it every week, and if the demand for Bitcoin is going up, because more and more people want it, and not every millionaire can have one whole Bitcoin, then the price must inevitably rise. That's simple economics. You could read it in a textbook, allegedly. But we're running out of time. Ben, Ark, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
I would like to give a shout out to DNI. He's one of the developers on LNBits, one of the main developers on LNBits, and he's been on this utter rampage MyPying the LNBits code base. So basically just cleaning up all the Python code. And I've merged like 20 of his PRs this week. And the guy's just on fire. I don't know what he's taking, don't know what he's doing, but yeah, big shout out to that dude. And that's my story of the week. It's just the amount of energy being poured into clearing up that LNBits code base. Also, I switched the icons for extensions for nice little tiles as well. So it looks a bit WordPressy now. We have all these nice pictures for all our little extensions. But yeah, thank you, DNI.
And be sure to check out the Bitcoin Year-End Spectacular, where we celebrate Ben and LNBits and Noster and all the open source contributors to those exciting projects. Victoria Jones, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Well, my story of the week is that I spent New Year's Eve with Bitcoiners down in London. It was very nice. And then we saw the fireworks from London Bridge. In fact, we didn't see all the proper fireworks. We saw some lame fireworks from Tower Bridge. No one told us that wasn't the best place to stop and see them. But even so, you know, that was a great way to spend New Year. So shout out to them. That was sponsored by Bitrefill. And there were quite a few people there from the Bitcoinology meetup in London. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Very cool. And I got to go to the Tower of London and the Tower Bridge, and I was maybe more interested in the bridge. Dan Eve, a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
Prediction, eh? Well, okay. So I think that I think there's going to be, I'm going to have a happy prediction here. Yeah. And my happy prediction is that there's going to be some breaking news on where Luke Deshear's coins are, and there'll be some progress in getting them back. So yeah, that's my prediction. It's a wild one, but I think someone in the FBI has gone, he's complaining about us, let's prove him wrong. And then, which would also maybe be a bad thing, but they'll end up taking someone's Bitcoin, even though they hold their own private keys. And then there'll be that contradiction of having your own private keys is safe from the government because the FBI is going to get it somehow. I don't know. It's all a bit crazy. It's 2023. And if it's anything like 2022, 2021, and 2020, anything could happen.
Well, to follow up on what Dan said, and I agree with Ben, I don't know about this Luke Deshear thing. That seems harder to say. But maybe he could just show some respect to the hackers, right? Maybe say, hey, guys, good job. You got me. But I'm a Bitcoin developer, and I'm broke now, and I could use some help. And maybe they'd send him some of the money back. You know, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but, you know, hackers like hackers. He's obviously a great coder, and he understands Bitcoin and so forth. Maybe just ask for it back nicely. You know, it's better than going to the FBI, right? So thanks to everybody for giving us a thumbs up down below, for saying hello in the chat or in the comments. We appreciate you, and we keep doing the show every week to entertain you and give you the news about Bitcoin. So thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, bye.